Reviving the dead is one of the most famous miracles of the Prophet Jesus alayhi salam and raises confusion. Today, my friends, I will tell you the story of two of the most famous stories of reviving the dead to Jesus alayhi salam. Wait for the second novel, which will surely raise your suspicions. Let's start with the first story, which is the story of revival of Lazarus, who was a friend of the Prophet Jesus alayhi salam. And it happened when he was afflicted with incurable disease. When his condition worsened, his sister sent to Jesus alayhi salam, telling him that his friend and brother Lazarus was dying. As soon as the message reached to the Prophet Jesus, he set off on the journey to his friend's house. But the house of Lazarus was 3 days away from the house of Jesus. So when Jesus arrived to his friend, he found him dead and buried. Of course, this matter aroused the grief of the Prophet of God, Jesus. But it was like an inspiration had come to him from heaven, asking him to go to his grave. Indeed, the sister went with Jesus alayhi salam and his companions to her brother's grave. Jesus said, "My God, Lord of the seven heavens, you sent me to the children of Israel, inviting them to your religion. And you told me that I revive the dead with your permission. So revive Lazarus." So what happened in your opinion? Of course, the rock split, and Lazarus woke up from his death, God willing, and lived after that and had a son. Listen carefully and prepare for the most suspicious miracles of the prophets. The unbelievers among the children of Israel claimed that it is possible that all those whom Jesus revived were unconscious, and they weren't dead, but their audacity reached the point that they accused the Prophet Jesus of being in agreement with the people who did and came back to life. And even more than that, they asked him for something strange, as they asked him to revive a personality from the ancient past, and they determined his personality. So, do you know who? They asked him to revive Sam, son of Nouh alayhi salam. Let me add a small thing regarding the revival of Sam, son of Nouh. There is another narration that says that Prophet Jesus was preaching to the apostle. Specifically, the subject of the lesson was the story of Nouh and his famous ship. One of his students asked him if he could bring one of the passengers of that ship. The order was to revive Sam, son of Nouh. We return to Jesus, who asked the children of Israel to show him the grave of Sam, and they took him to Sam's grave, who had died 4,000 years before the time of Christ. If it's assumed that the body has vanished, and the unbelievers intended to incapacitate the Prophet Jesus alayhi salam, and they were wrong, the people led by Jesus arrived at the grave. Jesus stood at the grave and prayed to God by his greatest name to resurrect Sam, son of Nouh, from his death, to refute the slanders of the children of Israel. Then he turned to the occupant of the grave, Sam, and said 3 times, "Sam, son of Nouh, get up, by God's permission. O Sam, son of Nouh, get up, by God's permission." 3 times. After the third call, the earth split open, and he came out from his grave with his gray hair. Then Jesus asked Sam about his name, in order to clarify the truth for the layers among the children of Israel. So he told him that he was Sam, son of Nouh. Then Sam asked Jesus if this day was the day of resurrection, and Jesus replied that the hour hadn't come yet, but he revived him, God willing, to present proof and evidence to the children of Israel. So Sam supported Jesus alayhi salam and asked the children of Israel to follow him. But the Prophet Jesus wasn't satisfied with this much, but rather asked him about the ship, and Sam answered him with everything he knew about the ship, its owner and its passengers. Nothing else was mentioned in the sources that dealt with this incident. We continue with the narration. So the sources say that the Prophet Jesus asked Sam about the reason for his delay in answering his call to revive from dead. And he also asked him about the reason for the gray in his hair. And they are known to be the people who don't turn gray and who live long. So how did the gray fill his hair when he did at the age of 500 years when he was a young man? That is according to the old perspective during the time of our Prophet Nouh. Listen to what he answered. Sam told him that when Jesus called him the first time, God gathered his joints and bones and completed his creation. In the second call, the soul returned to the body, while the third call is what caused Sam's hair to turn gray, as he was afraid that the resurrection has begun and he panicked from the reckoning, so his hair turned gray. After this dialogue, Jesus asked him what he wanted, whether he wanted life or death. So Sam told him that he wanted to return to death, so he had no need for him in this world. Except that he asked Jesus ﷺ to ask God to relieve Sam, son of Nouh, from the terrifying hardships of death. According to what he described, he had tasted the torment of death and grave, and he didn't want to repeat that experience again. So he had what he wanted, and the earth restored its flatness, and contained in its hollow Sam, son of Nouh, and God took his soul once again. So, my friends, these were the most famous stories of our Prophet Jesus ﷺ about reviving the dead. Stories that show us the extent of his greatness and the ability of the Creator, glory be to him, and stories that show us the extent of arrogance and hatred over the years that characterized the children of Israel. There is no torment like the torment of the grave, and knowledge remains with God alone.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وقلنا من بعده لبني إسرائيل اسكنوا الأرض فإذا جاء وعد الآخرة جئنا بكم لفيفا وبالحق أنزلناه وبالحق نزل وما أرسلناك إلا مبشرا ونذيرا وقرآنا فرقناه لتقرأه على الناس على مكث ونزلناه تنزيلا قل آمنوا به أو لا تؤمنوا إن الذين أوتوا العلم من قبله إذا يتلى عليهم يخرون للأذقان سجدا ويقولون سبحان ربنا إن كان وعد ربنا لمفعولا ويخرون للأذقان يبكون ويزيدهم خشوعا قل ادعوا الله أو ادعوا الرحمن أيما تدعوا فله الأسماء الحسنى ولا تجهر بصلاتك ولا تخافت بها وابتغ بين ذلك سبيلا وقل الحمد لله الذي لم يتخذ ولدا ولم يكن له شريك في الملك ولم يكن له ولي من الذل وكبره تكبيرا.